Welcome to the Speak English podcast, where you learn to speak fluently and confidently. Get practical tips and real-world conversations in every episode. Let's begin.
All right, so you're here with us because you're ready to really boost your English fluency.
Right, and you want to do it fast.
Yeah, like let's say there's a job you're hoping to land or a big trip abroad you're looking forward to.
Or maybe it's just about that feeling, that you can express yourself confidently in English.
Exactly. So 30 days to fluency.
That's a pretty bold goal, right?
It is, and that's what we're going to dig into today.
For this deep dive, you've pulled together a bunch of online resources about learning English quickly.
Yeah, I did.
And what's interesting is that they each kind of have their own angle. Some
Right.
are all about just practicing on your own, while others are more into structured lessons.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole idea of immersion, like just surrounding yourself with English 24/7.
Right. So listener, what we're going to do today is go through all of these different perspectives.
And pull out the techniques that actually work.
Yeah, we want to give you a clear plan
That you can use to make some serious progress.
in just a month.
Yeah. Because we know your time is precious.
Exactly.
So let's jump right in.
Okay, so first of all, we got to be realistic.
Yeah, fluency in 30 days, that's catchy. But is it really possible?
Right. One of our sources, Leverage Edu.
They make a good point. They
Yeah.
say that becoming truly fluent in such a short time is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
However, they also say that if you put in the work consistently,
Okay.
you will definitely start to see results.
That makes sense.
Slow and steady progress.
Right. And to understand just how big of a task this is,
Uh-huh.
Leverage Edu, they mention the U.S. Foreign Service Institute.
Oh, yeah, the FSI.
Yeah, they have these rankings for how difficult different languages are to learn.
Right.
And even for languages considered relatively easy for English speakers to pick up, like Spanish or French,
Yep.
they estimate that it takes like 480 to 7 to 20 hours of study just to reach a basic level of fluency.
Wow.
Yeah, so think about that in the context of 30 days.
Right. So we're talking about needing some really super efficient learning methods.
Exactly. And another thing Leverage Edu points out is that your attitude plays a big role.
Oh, absolutely.
How motivated you are.
Yeah. Are you actually excited about learning English?
And how much effort you're willing to put in.
Exactly. And of course, the amount of time you can actually dedicate to studying.
Right. All of that's going to affect how quickly you progress.
Definitely. So it's not just about what you do.
Yeah.
It's also about how you approach the whole process.
Okay, so our goal then is to make some really solid progress in 30 days.
Right. Significant improvement.
Exactly. And to do that, we got to use some smart strategies.
For sure. What are some of the key themes that you noticed across all these resources?
Well, one thing that really stands out is the importance of actually speaking.
Oh, yeah. Like from day one.
Exactly. Edwards English, in their program, they're big on this. They actually say, don't worry too much about perfect grammar at first.
Interesting.
Yeah, just focus on getting those words out. Their motto is basically, just speak and start feeling good about your English.
I like that. It's about building confidence, right?
Right, and the idea is that if you want to be able to speak fluently,
Yeah.
well, you need to spend time actually speaking.
Makes sense. So how do they suggest actually doing that?
They have this really simple but effective exercise.
Okay.
They call it 5 minutes of speaking to yourself every day.
Talking to yourself, huh?
I know it sounds kind of strange, but
Yeah.
basically you just pick a topic, anything really like what you did that day or
Yeah.
what you're planning to do or your family or work,
Okay.
and you just talk about it out loud for 5 minutes in English.
So it's like practice just getting those words flowing,
Yeah, and getting comfortable hearing yourself speak in English.
which can be tough for a lot of people.
It can. Another tip from Edwards English that I thought was really interesting
Okay.
is what they call the moving to Australia tip.
Moving to Australia. Okay. I'm intrigued.
So imagine you've just moved to Australia
All right.
and you don't know anyone who speaks your native language.
Oh, wow. So you're forced to use English all the time.
Exactly. And you have to constantly think, okay, what's this thing called in English? Or how do I say this in English?
Interesting.
So Edwards English, they say, try to do that even if you're not actually in Australia.
So like consciously make an effort to think in English throughout the day.
Right. Like when you see a car,
Yeah.
think car in English.
Okay.
Don't translate it from your native language.
Got it. So it's like you're training your brain to think directly in English.
Exactly. And that can really help with fluency.
Because you're not always having to go through that translation step in your head.
Right. Okay, so we've got speaking practice and thinking in English.
What else?
Well, another big one that comes up in a lot of these resources is surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Oh, yeah. Immersion?
Right. Both Edwards English and How to Speak English Fluently in 30 Days, they both talk about this.
And what kind of things do they recommend?
Well, they say you should listen to and watch a lot of English content.
Okay.
So things like podcasts, TED Talks,
Yep.
movies, TV shows.
Okay. Whatever you find interesting?
Exactly. The key is to make it something you actually enjoy.
Right, because then you're more likely to stick with it.
Exactly. And they say it's a really natural way to pick up new vocabulary and to get used to the rhythm and intonation of English.
That natural flow.
Yeah. And especially at the beginning, using English subtitles can be really helpful.
Right, because it helps you connect the sounds with the written words.
Exactly. Now, Edwards English, they take this idea of immersion one step further
Oh, how so?
with their input-output exercise.
Input-output, what's that?
So they say after you've listened to or watched something in English,
Okay.
take some time to actually speak about what you just heard.
Oh, interesting. So you're not just passively absorbing the language.
Right. You're actively processing it
Right.
and then trying to use the new words and phrases you learned.
By speaking them out loud.
Exactly. And that can really help to cement them in your memory.
That makes sense. It's like taking what you've learned and putting it into practice right away.
Right. Okay, what about vocabulary?
Ah, yes, the building blocks of language.
How to speak English fluently in 30 days. They have a pretty specific recommendation for this.
What's that?
They say you should try to learn about 10 to 15 new words every day.
10 to 15. Okay, that's ambitious.
It is, but it's doable.
And what's the best way to go about learning all those new words?
Well, leverage Edu that suggests using flashcards,
Oh, yeah, good old flashcards.
vocabulary apps.
There are some great ones out there.
There are. They can make learning new words a lot more fun.
Definitely. And one thing that's not mentioned explicitly in these resources,
Okay.
but that I think is really important for vocabulary learning, is the idea of spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition. What's that?
So basically, it's a way of reviewing information at increasing intervals.
Okay.
So let's say you learn a good word today.
Yeah.
You would review it again tomorrow. Then maybe 2 days later.
Okay.
Then a week later, and so on.
So you're gradually spacing out the reviews.
Exactly. And research has shown that this is a really effective way to improve long-term retention.
So it's not just about learning the words once.
Right. It's about making sure you remember them over time.
Okay, so speaking practice, thinking in English, immersion, vocabulary building.
What about grammar?
Yeah, that's the big one, right?
It can feel pretty daunting.
It can. Now, Edwards English, they seem to say don't sweat the grammar too much at the beginning.
Just focus on speaking.
Right. But how to speak English fluently in 30 days, they do emphasize understanding at least the basics of grammar.
Yeah, like verb tenses.
Yeah, and sentence structure.
Right. So how do we balance those two approaches?
Well, I think it's about finding a middle ground.
Okay.
You don't want to get so bogged down in grammar rules that you're afraid to open your mouth and speak.
Right.
But at the same time, having a basic understanding of grammar will help you communicate more clearly.
Exactly. How to speak English fluently in 30 days, they make a good point.
Yeah.
They say that even if you're not aiming for perfect grammar, knowing things like how to form simple sentences
Yeah.
will help you get your ideas across.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about these core strategies.
Yeah, speaking practice, thinking in English immersion, building your vocabulary, and understanding the basics of grammar.
Right. But how do you actually put all of that into practice?
Right, because it's one thing to talk about these strategies,
Yeah.
but it's another thing to actually make them a part of your daily life.
Right. And what about those inevitable challenges that come up when you're learning a new language?
Yeah, like fear of making mistakes.
Or just feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. So let's talk about how to deal with those practical aspects.
Okay, so how to speak English fluently. In 30 days, they have a really useful suggestion.
Okay.
They say you should practice real-life situations.
Oh, like role-playing.
Exactly. So think about common scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant.
Yep.
Or asking for directions.
Or introducing yourself to someone.
Right. And then practice those conversations out loud.
So when you actually encounter those situations in real life, you'll feel more prepared.
Exactly. Now, another thing that comes up a lot is the importance of getting feedback.
Oh, yeah, because how do you know if you're actually improving?
Right. Both Leverage Edu and How to Speak English Fluently in 30 days, they both recommend practicing with native speakers.
Yeah.
And asking them for feedback on your pronunciation and fluency.
But what if you don't have any native English-speaking friends or colleagues?
Right. Edwards English, they acknowledge that not everyone has that luxury, and they have a program designed for people who are learning on their own.
So what do they suggest?
Well, they have this great tip.
Okay.
They say record yourself speaking English.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, do it at the beginning of your 30-day challenge.
Okay.
And then again at the end.
And then compare the two recordings.
Exactly. That way you can actually hear how much you've improved.
That's a really good idea, because sometimes it's hard to notice your own progress.
It is How to Speak English Fluently in 30 days. They also have a suggestion for using recordings.
What's that?
They say you should record yourself speaking.
Okay.
And then compare it to recordings of native speakers.
Oh, interesting. So you can hear the differences in pronunciation and intonation.
Right, and that can help you identify areas where you need to work on.
Yeah, like maybe you're stressing the wrong syllable in a word.
Or maybe your rhythm is a little off.
Right. And speaking of challenges,
Yeah.
one of the biggest ones for a lot of language learners is the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. It can be so paralyzing.
Yeah, you're so worried about saying the wrong thing that you end up not speaking at all.
Right. But how to speak English fluently in 30 days, they have some really reassuring advice for this.
Oh, good. What do they say?
They say, first of all, making mistakes is totally normal.
Of course it is. Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning something new.
Exactly. And they also say that most people are actually really understanding.
Yeah, they appreciate that you're making an effort.
Exactly. So don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back.
Right. And they also suggest practicing in situations where you feel comfortable.
Like talking to yourself
Yeah.
or recording yourself.
Where there's no pressure to be perfect.
Exactly. Okay. And finally, the big one that comes up again and again in all of these resources.
Consistency.
Yes.
You got to be consistent.
You do both Leverage Edu and How to Speak English Fluently. In 30 days, they both emphasize this.
Right. It's not about having one super long study session
Yeah.
and then doing nothing for a week.
Exactly. It's much more effective to do a little bit every day.
Even if it's just for 15 minutes.
Right. Okay, so you're putting in the work consistently.
You're practicing speaking, thinking in English, surrounding yourself with the language.
But how do you know if it's actually working?
Yeah, how do you track your progress?
Right. And how do you stay motivated when you inevitably hit those plateaus?
When it feels like you're not making any progress?
Right. Edwards English, they have a good system for this.
Okay, tell me about it.
They recommend doing a weekly self-evaluation.
A weekly check-in.
Yeah, so at the end of each week, ask yourself some questions like,
What?
how much time did I actually spend on English this week?
Okay.
What activities did I find most helpful?
Yeah.
What didn't work so well? Did I get enough speaking practice?
Mm-hmm.
And am I still on track to reach my goals?
That's a great framework for reflecting on your progress.
It is. And How to Speak English Fluently in 30 days, they take this a step further.
They do.
They provide a super detailed checklist for tracking your progress each week.
What kind of things are on this checklist?
Well, it covers pretty much everything.
Like what?
So first of all, it asks about your vocabulary growth.
Okay. Have you been learning those 10 to 15 new words every day?
Right. Then it asks about your understanding of grammar.
Okay.
Are you starting to feel more comfortable with basic sentence structures? Then it asks about your pronunciation.
Okay. Are you making progress on those tricky sounds?
Exactly. It also asks about your speaking fluency.
Are you able to speak more smoothly and confidently?
Right. And if you have the opportunity, it encourages you to get feedback from others.
Okay. So check in with a native speaker if you can.
Right. It also asks about your overall confidence level.
That's important because feeling confident can make a big difference.
It can. And then it asks about testing your knowledge.
So like doing quizzes or exercises.
Exactly. And it also encourages you to actually use your English in real-life situations.
Right, like those role-playing scenarios we talked about.
Exactly. And finally, it reminds you to track your milestones.
Okay, so celebrate those small wins along the way.
Right. Now, to help you stay motivated throughout those 30 days, How to Speak English Fluently. In 30 days, they offer a few bonus tips.
Oh, nice. What are they?
Well, first of all, they say you should set clear and achievable goals.
Right, so you know what you're working towards.
Exactly. And they say establish that consistent daily routine we talked about.
You make it a habit.
Yeah. And finally, they say try to create an English-speaking environment for yourself.
Oh, yes, surround yourself with the language.
Right. So you could change the language settings on your phone and computer, listen to English music, even label things around your house in English.
It's about making English a constant presence in your life.
Exactly. So listener, while becoming completely fluent in English in just 30 days might be a bit of a stretch.
It's a tall order.
What we've learned from all these resources is that you can absolutely make significant progress if you use the right strategies.
Like what?
Prioritize speaking practice, actively engage with the language, and track your progress regularly.
And remember, it's all about consistency.
Exactly. And to keep that motivation going, here's something to think about.
Okay.
What's one specific situation that you're looking forward to navigating more confidently in English?
Like a job interview?
Maybe, or giving a presentation.
Or traveling to a new country.
Right. Whatever it is, keep that picture in your mind
and
let it fuel your efforts.
Because that sense of purpose can really help you stay on track.
It can. And remember, as one of our sources pointed out, even 15 minutes of practice every day is better than none at all.
Those small efforts add up over time.
They do. And before you know it,
you'll be surprised at how far you've come.
Exactly. All right, that's it for our deep dive on how to boost your English fluency in 30 days.
I hope you found it helpful.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.